My sister humiliated me at her party, but what she did afterward shook me to my core. My name is Hannah Walker. The moment I stepped into the gallery, I knew I didn't belong. Not tonight. Not in this crowd. Not in this dress. The air smelled like overripe lilies and catered ambition. Everyone looked too glossy, too loud, like they were trying to out-celebrate each other. I was 20 minutes late, on purpose. If I could have skipped the night entirely, I would have, but showing up was its own kind of power. Quiet, defiant. Lauren's voice cut through the buzz before I even saw her. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she called across the crowd, champagne glass raised. Her curls bounced with each exaggerated step as she turned toward the cluster of executives behind her. Someone had to be the family failure. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly. It was worse. It was casual, comfortable, like mocking me had become part of the evening's agenda. I kept walking. My heels clicked a little louder than I intended on the polished floor. The sound echoed, crisp against the soft jazz playing overhead. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. This wasn't new. Lauren always knew how to find the bruise. She'd been perfect since birth, apparently. Top of her class. Student body president. Prom queen. Full scholarship. Six-figure job by 25. And me? I was the one who didn't call enough. Who moved too far away. Who didn't pose well for Christmas cards or respond in time to the group chat. The room was full of people who didn't know the half of it. They didn't know about the summer Lauren told our entire extended family I failed out of school because I dropped out of a program I hated to build something I actually believed in. Or how she'd laughed when I wore a thrift store blazer to Grandma's funeral and whispered, "Do you ever not look tired?" She always did it with a smile. That was her real trick. The cruelty was coated in charm. And still, I stayed silent. Let the words land. Because that's what I'd been taught. Don't make waves. Be the bigger person. Breathe through it. But then a voice spoke up. "Not mine. That's enough, Lauren." Everything stopped. The words weren't loud, but they cut through the air like glass breaking in a cathedral. Heads turned. Mine included. He stood near the back, tall, composed, one hand raised, like a man accustomed to command. Mr. Bennett. I didn't know him well. Lauren's boss, vice president of whatever title meant powerful without being flashy. He wasn't smiling. His expression was unreadable, the kind that made people hold their breath. Lauren laughed, but it didn't land the same this time. "Oh, come on, we're just teasing. Hannah's fine. She knows we're joking." But her voice had changed. Higher, brittle. Mr. Bennett didn't look away from me for a beat too long. He just studied me, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. And then he turned back to Lauren. That's not how it looked from where I'm standing. You could hear the shift in the room, a ripple of discomfort. Guests suddenly fascinated with their drinks. Forks paused midair. Someone near the appetizer table cleared their throat, loud and awkward. I kept my face still. I didn't move. But inside, something stirred. Not pride, not yet. Something closer to shock. Because in all the years of Lauren's jabs, not once had someone stepped in, and especially not someone like him. I felt everyone's eyes darting between us. The sister in pearls and a perfect dress, and the one who came late alone, in flats and a wrinkled blazer. The disappointment, the afterthought. But for the first time, they didn't seem so sure. I didn't know what was coming next, but I felt the shift in the air. Something had changed. And maybe, just maybe, this time, I wasn't the one who should feel small. No one moved. It was the strangest kind of quiet. Not silence, but that charged stillness that comes when a room collectively forgets how to breathe. Mr. Bennett's voice wasn't loud, but it had landed like a gavel. Lauren's smile twitched. She let out a little laugh, too bright. "Come on, Greg." "Mr. Bennett," he corrected, still calm, still steady. "Let's keep this professional." That's when the whispering started. Small, almost inaudible threads of conversation, weaving through the room like smoke. I saw someone near the wine bar lean toward their friend. A couple of interns near the door froze mid-sip. Even the pianist stumbled through a chord before recovering. I stood exactly where I was, unsure what to do with my hands. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, but I wasn't blushing. It was something colder. The familiar burn of being called out in front of strangers, of being laughed at, used to sink deep and settle into my bones. But tonight, there was something else beneath it. Mr. Bennet looked at me again. Really looked. I'd met him once before, maybe twice. At the last holiday party, I think. Back then, I doubt he remembered my name. Tonight, his eyes lingered a little longer, not with pity. I knew that look, but with something else I hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition. I said, "That's enough," he repeated, still holding Lauren's gaze. Her mouth opened like she was going to protest again, but nothing came out. I should have said something. Thanked him, maybe. Broken the tension. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, watching it unfold like I wasn't the one at the center of it. Because for once, the narrative wasn't mine to carry. I wasn't the punchline tonight. Lauren finally stepped back, brushing a piece of lint off her sleeve, like it could erase what had just happened. "Well, I suppose everyone's a little sensitive these days," she said with a tight smile. "Let's get back to the fun, shall we?" But the spell had broken. The clink of glasses resumed, but slower. The conversations picked back up, but now they were filled with glances. Quick flicks of the eye between me, Lauren, and the man who had stepped in. And still, he didn't look away from me. Mr. Bennet gave the smallest nod. Not a bow, not some grand gesture, just enough to say, "I see you." That prickle on my skin? It wasn't shame. Not this time. It was something I hadn't felt in years. Doubt, but not mine. Theirs. People were starting to wonder. Lauren turned away, already laughing too loudly with someone else, trying to patch over the rupture like it never happened. But the thing about cracks, once they're there, you can't unsee them. A woman with a designer clutch brushed past me on her way to the restroom. She didn't say anything, but she looked at me a little too long, like she was trying to remember where she'd seen me before. The answer? Nowhere. Because I'd been invisible. On purpose. But that was changing, whether I wanted it to or not. I moved toward the back of the room, where the shadows were softer and the conversations less pointed. I needed a moment, just one, not to regroup, but to feel, to absorb what had just happened, because something had shifted in that room, and not just in how they saw me, in how I saw myself. I stayed near the back of the room, quietly nursing a glass of sparkling water I didn't ask for. The edge of the glass was damp against my fingers. People moved around me like I was part of the furniture, present but not of interest, familiar territory. But this time, something was different. They were confused. And confusion, I've learned, can be a beautiful thing. It means someone's narrative has cracked open just wide enough for the truth to slip in. Lauren was still working the room, clinking glasses and doling out laughter like party favors. But the edges of her performance had started to fray. I saw it in the way her shoulders were pulled too tight, the way her eyes flicked toward me and then away. Fast, like a tell. Her allies weren't following her cues. Not all of them. Not anymore. A group of guests near the hors d'oeuvre table exchanged subtle glances when she walked by. A man from finance, I think, said something under his breath that made the woman beside him raise an eyebrow. She looked toward me, then back at him. I didn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. I've lived enough years in Lauren's shadow to know what silence feels like when it turns into speculation. And yet, even as the room shifted, I felt something old rising inside me, that trained instinct to disappear before someone gave me a reason. I pressed my palm against the side of my dress. Cheap polyester, poorly steamed. I'd picked it because it wouldn't draw attention, not because I liked it. Lauren always wore color. Bold, sharp, camera-ready color. I wore navy and charcoal. Safe tones. The kind of colors you blend into walls with. But I couldn't blend anymore. Not after what Mr. Bennet had said. I scanned the crowd and found him again, speaking to a woman with silver hair and a diamond necklace I recognized from an article in Forbes. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't need to. The moment had passed, and yet it hung in the air like unfinished music. I wondered what he'd seen, why he'd spoken up, if it was personal or if he simply hated watching someone punched down. And then I felt it, that old, unwelcome burn, shame. Not from what Lauren had said, but from how much it still affected me. Even after all these years, all the work, all the distance, how easily I could still be pulled back into that role. The overlooked one, the easy target, the disappointment. A woman with dark curls and a notepad lingered near the fireplace. PR, maybe, or comms. Her eyes drifted between Lauren and me, then down to the pad in her hand. She scribbled something quickly, then turned away. More confusion. I didn't flinch. But inside, the ground felt like it was tilting. What were they whispering now? That maybe Hannah wasn't just the failure sister? That maybe Lauren's shiny veneer had some hairline fractures they hadn't seen before? I shouldn't have cared, but I did. I hated how much I still wanted someone, anyone, to see through the performance, to realize I wasn't the version of me Lauren sold at family dinners or Christmas brunch. But validation is a dangerous hunger, and I'd gone cold turkey years ago. Still, standing there, I couldn't deny the flicker inside me. Not pride, not yet, but maybe the beginning of something that lived next door to it. I adjusted the strap of my bag and moved toward the window, letting the cool glass press against my shoulder. Outside, city lights blinked like stars. Somewhere below, cabs were honking, and people were moving through their Friday nights, without a clue that in a loft full of expensive wine and designer heels, something subtle was cracking wide open. The sound of laughter from behind me made me turn my head. Lauren, throwing her head back at something someone said. But there was a tightness in it now, the kind that comes when you realize the room isn't laughing with you the way it used to. One of the board members stood nearby, not joining in, just watching. The prickle of being dismissed was still there. It always would be. But now it wasn't just mine to carry. For the first time, other people were feeling it too, and they didn't know what to make of it. I barely heard Mr. Bennett at first. He was speaking calmly, clearly, and yet his voice sliced through the buzz of the room like the only thing worth listening to. I turned before I realized why. He stood near the center now, holding his phone in one hand, the other tucked into his jacket pocket, like he wasn't about to upend the entire evening. "Let me read something to you," he said, his voice unhurried. "Hannah Walker, co-founder, Boston Division, the one who approved my recent promotion." For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly, but the gasp? That told me everyone else had. A man near the buffet dropped his fork. Two women froze with champagne flutes halfway to their lips. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lauren's face didn't change immediately, but I saw it. The flicker of uncertainty. Her smile strained, faltered, and then slowly she turned toward him. What? She said, trying to laugh. It didn't come out right. Mr. Bennett didn't blink. "The Boston Division," he repeated, "where I spent 4 years, quietly, under a co-founder you rarely speak about, one who signed my final promotion papers 3 months ago." He looked at me again, and this time, the nod wasn't subtle. It was deliberate, public. I didn't move, couldn't. Lauren's voice tightened. "That can't be right. She doesn't even..." But she stopped herself, realized, too late, that anything she said now would only make it worse. There were too many people watching, too many eyebrows lifted. Her name had been the center of this event, until mine slipped in and disrupted the shape of it. I saw someone pull out their phone. Someone else whispered into a colleague's ear, eyes darting between me and Mr. Bennett like a tennis match. And I just stood there. I don't think I'd ever seen Lauren look speechless before. She was always the first to jump in, to clarify, to smooth things over with that polished, poised tone she'd perfected since high school debate club. But now, her silence said everything. Mr. Bennett wasn't finished. "I met Hannah during a funding cycle years ago," he added. "We didn't talk much, but when she did speak, people listened. because she only spoke when it mattered. The room wasn't listening to Lauren anymore. They were listening to him, and by extension, to me. And suddenly, the narrative Lauren had so carefully constructed, the bright one, the success story, the sister who did everything right, was bending at the edges, warping under the weight of something she couldn't charm her way out of. Truth? The feeling in my chest was hard to describe. It wasn't pride exactly. It was sharper than that, older. Like the first time I realized I'd built something real, something lasting, and told no one about it. Because I didn't think anyone would care. Because my family had taught me not to expect applause. Lauren stepped forward, voice low now, urgent. Okay, that's enough. This isn't the time. But Mr. Bennett didn't flinch. It's exactly the time. He wasn't angry. That's what made it land harder. He was just done. Done with the performance. With the hierarchy. With the kind of cruelty that gets passed off as humor until someone holds up a mirror. And that mirror? Tonight, it was me. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't planned this. But there it was, held up in front of Lauren and the crowd she'd spent her life dazzling. For once, I wasn't the shadow at her feet. I was the one casting light. And they were finally seeing the cracks. The air inside had turned heavy, thick with discomfort, disguised as politeness. But outside, the night breathed. I slipped through the gallery doors and stepped into the open air, where the cold hit me sharp in the lungs and cleared the last of the tension from my chest. The sky above was a deep slate blue, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement like silver veins. I didn't know if I'd been dismissed or if I had simply removed myself. For once, it didn't feel like running. It felt like reclaiming space. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked toward the edge of the terrace. I could still hear the faint hum of music through the gallery walls. But out here, everything slowed. I let my body exhale. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Light, hesitant, not Lauren's. Excuse me? I turned. It was a young woman. Early 20s, maybe. Wide-eyed, black blazer, slightly too big. The kind of stiff name badge that screams, intern. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be talking to me at all. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly. You're Hannah Walker, right?" I blinked. It took a second to register. I wasn't used to that name carrying any weight. Not in public spaces, not in this family. "I am," I said carefully. She stepped closer, clutching her phone like a shield. That was legendary. I almost laughed, but she wasn't joking. Her eyes were shining like she'd just witnessed something she'd tell friends about for weeks. When Mr. Bennett said your name, I thought, wait, that Hannah Walker? And then the way you just stood there? You didn't even flinch. She sounded breathless. I was flinching on the inside, I said quietly, offering a small smile. She grinned. Still, it was, I don't know, kind of amazing to watch. I looked at her more closely now. She couldn't have been more than 22. I remembered what that age felt like. Everything too loud, too uncertain, like you're always on the edge of proving yourself. Like one wrong move might define your whole career. "I used to be like you," I said softly. She tilted her head. "Nervous?" "No," I said. "Invisible." She didn't laugh. She just nodded, as if she understood something about that already. "I hope," she said slowly, "I get to work with people like you someday." I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments like that. They don't land easily when you've spent a lifetime trying not to need them. But for once, I let myself take it in. "Thank you," I said. She smiled, offered a tiny wave, and turned back toward the gallery. And I stood there, alone again, but not lonely. Not this time. Behind me, I could still hear the murmur of voices, the sound of a party trying to pretend it hadn't just been cracked wide open. I imagined Lauren working the room, smoothing over what she could, spinning whatever version of the story would preserve her image. But I knew, deep down, the damage had been done. Because no matter how carefully you craft a lie, it only takes one truth, calmly delivered, unapologetically real, to make people stop and blink, to make them wonder. I watched the intern disappear back inside. Her shoulders were squared, her step a little surer. And I thought about all the years I had stayed quiet. All the times I'd swallowed the words I should have said out loud. And maybe this wasn't revenge. Maybe it never was. It was just the truth, finally having its turn. I stayed out there longer than I meant to, let the cold bite into my skin until it stopped feeling sharp. It was strange how peaceful it felt. Alone, but not diminished. Quiet, but not silenced. When I finally turned to go back inside, I caught a glimpse through the gallery windows. Lauren was still surrounded by guests, but the shape of the crowd had shifted. She wasn't the center anymore. The sparkle had dulled. There was an edge of tension to her smile now, like it had to be held in place. I didn't go back in. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked around the side of the building toward the valet. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket, but I didn't check it. Let them wonder. Halfway down the steps, I heard someone jog up behind me. "I'm sorry. Wait!" I turned, hard in my throat for a moment. But it wasn't Lauren. It was someone else from the party. A woman in a slate gray jumpsuit and scuffed heels. She had the look of someone still riding the high of the evening's gossip, but there was no malice in her face. "You probably don't remember me," she said, catching her breath. "Nicole. I used to intern at the Boston office when it first opened. Summer 2018. You spoke at our welcome meeting. That summer, I remembered it vaguely. A blur of late nights, budget wars, and constant uphill climbing. But I did remember taking the time to meet the interns. It had mattered to me then. It still did." "You told us something I never forgot," Nicole said, her voice softer now. "You don't need permission to be brilliant. You just need proof. And you already are the proof." She laughed a little, self-conscious. "I wrote it down. It's taped to my bathroom mirror." I blinked. I guess I wanted to say thanks," she added. "Not just for that. For tonight. You handled it with so much dignity. It made me feel like maybe I don't have to shrink so much, you know? That did something to me. Twisted something loose in my chest." "Thank you," I managed. It came out thinner than I intended. Because it wasn't pride I felt in that moment. It was grief for the years I spent shrinking, apologizing, hiding behind the convenient fiction of being the lesser one, for the way I had folded myself up just to keep the peace, even when it split me down the middle. Nicole gave me one last nod before she turned to go, and that was it. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just real words, spoken plainly in the night by someone who had quietly been watching. Back at the valet stand, my car had just pulled up. The attendant opened the door, and I slipped inside, letting the warmth of the leather seats hold me for a moment. I didn't drive off right away. Instead, I sat with my hands on the wheel, watching the soft glow of the gallery in my rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, Lauren was still trying to salvage the evening, but the story had already changed. Not because I fought her, not because I tore anything down, but because I didn't flinch. And because someone else, someone unexpected, had seen what she didn't want anyone else to see, the truth. By the time I got home that night, the adrenaline had worn off. What was left was quieter. Not exhaustion exactly, but something heavier. A stillness. I kicked off my shoes by the door, set my phone face down on the table, and let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. I didn't want to know what people were saying. I didn't need to. Because I already felt it, the shift, not just in the room at the party, but beyond it. The narrative that had followed me like a fog for years was starting to burn off, slowly, unevenly, but surely. 2 weeks passed. No one from my family called. Not surprising. What did surprise me was what did come, a short, clipped email from the HR liaison at Lauren's company. Apparently, her promotion had been placed on, quote, conditional review. That was the phrase they used, a formal way of saying, the optics weren't great. I hadn't asked for anything, hadn't filed a complaint, hadn't even commented, but the moment had lingered. And actions have a way of speaking long after words fail. Late Friday evening, a text popped up on my phone. I didn't recognize the number at first. "Lauren, did you report me?" I stared at the message, thumb hovering. My reflection blinked back at me in the dark screen, older and sharper than I remembered. I thought about leaving it unanswered, thought about crafting something gracious. But then I typed the truth. "Me. No need. You showed them everything yourself." I hit send and placed the phone on the counter. There was nothing cruel in it, just clarity. Because that's what I'd always wanted. Not revenge, not retribution, just distance. And the truth, plain and bare. The next morning, I got a message from someone I hadn't seen since college. A former friend of Lauren's, apparently. We'd never been close. But she wrote, "Hey, I saw what happened at the party. I always wondered why Lauren talked about you like you were some ghost in the family. Didn't know you were running things behind the scenes. Any roles open at your company?" I didn't reply right away. Not because I was angry, because I was still adjusting to being seen. Later that afternoon, as I walked through the office, my office, something strange happened. A junior team member held the elevator for me, eyes wide. "You're that Hannah Walker, right?" I laughed a little. "I guess so." She smiled like she'd won something, even just being near me, and I felt that twist again. Not pride, not exactly, more like reclamation. My name wasn't a shadow anymore. It was finally taking up space. Back home that night, I sat on my couch with the city stretching out below the windows, lights flickering like stars. My phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't Lauren. It was a notification. A post from Mr. Bennett had gone viral. A black and white photo of him speaking at a conference, captioned simply, "Great leaders don't always stand in the spotlight. Sometimes they're the ones who stayed silent until the moment called for courage. Thank you, Hannah Walker, for showing us the difference." It had thousands of likes, dozens of comments. I didn't respond. I didn't repost. I just sat there, staring at the glow of the screen in the quiet of my apartment. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible at all. It started with a message from Tasha Bloom. I hadn't heard her name in years, not since high school, when she and Lauren were inseparable. Homecoming, senior prom, graduation night. They were a matched set. Lip gloss, whispered gossip, and endless judgment passed in the backs of other people's cars. Her message was short. "Hey, I know this is random, but I was wondering if your company's hiring. Marketing, admin, honestly anything. Just looking for a fresh start." There was no preamble, no apology, no acknowledgement of who she used to be to me, or more accurately, who she helped Lauren make me feel like. Still, I read it twice, not out of resentment, but disbelief. The same girl who used to laugh when Lauren told people I was the family misprint was now hoping I'd offer her a lifeline. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. The truth was already doing its work, and it wasn't just Tasha. Within a week, I noticed names I hadn't seen in years popping up in my inbox and notifications. Quiet apologies disguised as admiration, thinly veiled requests buried in praise. A few even tagged me in old photos online, group shots where I'd been shoved to the edge or cut off entirely. Suddenly, I was being edited back in. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing. Calls from numbers I hadn't saved, or maybe had erased out of instinct. My mother, my aunt, even my brother's wife, who once told me, during Thanksgiving dinner, that some girls just aren't meant for big lives. Voicemail after voicemail, vague greetings, awkward check-ins, Lauren's name floating through each one like a warning bell, never quite landing but always implied. I didn't answer, because now that they'd seen what I'd built, on my own, in silence, they were suddenly curious. Not about me, not really, but about what they had overlooked, ignored, discarded. There's something unsettling about being remembered only when you become useful, and I was done being useful to people who never truly saw me. One morning, just before heading into work, I opened LinkedIn to check a message from a mentee. At the top of my feed was a post from Mr. Bennett. It had gone viral again. A photo of the two of us, taken during a conference panel the week after the party. I hadn't even realized someone had snapped it. I wasn't smiling, just listening, focused. The caption read, "Real leadership doesn't always need a microphone. Sometimes it just needs presence. Grateful to be led by someone who reminds us that dignity is louder than performance." Over 80,000 views, thousands of shares, and dozens of comments from classmates, old colleagues, strangers. I scrolled past the hearts and fire emojis, past the praise and name checks, and then I saw it. A comment from a woman named Grace Simmons, my former econ professor. She wrote, "I always knew she was exceptional. Took the time to help her peers even when she was drowning in work. Not surprised one bit." I stared at it for a while, unsure what to feel. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself smile without caution. They were finally catching up to the truth I'd carried alone for years. And not because I'd demanded attention, but because I'd stopped needing it. It came in a small white envelope with no return address. I found it wedged between a magazine subscription renewal and a catalog I hadn't asked for, tucked so neatly it almost disappeared. My first instinct was to toss it, another generic piece of mail I didn't need. But then I saw the handwriting. I knew it instantly. Lauren's. The curve of the L, the slant of the E's. She always wrote like she was afraid someone would misinterpret her, as if neatness could cover what words couldn't. I stood in the kitchen, fingers resting on the seal for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. No glittery designs, no flourish, just words, handwritten in a trembling ink I almost didn't recognize. "Hannah, I wasn't gonna write this. I told myself you didn't care, that you were cold enough to let all of it slide off your back, that you were distant by choice, not defense. But I saw your name in that post again today, and I realized you were never the disappointment. I was. I just never saw it. I'm sorry. For the party, for the jokes, for making you the punchline whenever it suited me. I thought it was harmless. I thought everyone understood it was just how sisters tease, but it wasn't harmless. I see that now. You were always the strong one. I just needed someone weaker than me to believe I had worth. You don't have to write back. I wouldn't expect you to, but I wanted you to know. I remember, and I regret it. Lauren." I read it once, then again, each line slower than the last. There was a time, not so long ago, when I would have clung to a letter like that. Read it until the corners frayed. Replayed every word for signs of sincerity, of healing. I would have taken it as an invitation, a crack in the armor, a hope that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to some version of whole. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I folded the letter carefully, not to destroy it, not to forgive it, but to file it away, like you do with paperwork that no longer requires your attention, but once held power over your life. I opened the drawer of my writing desk and slipped it between two folders. One marked old lease agreements, the other warranty receipts. It didn't deserve a shrine. It didn't need to be burned. It just needed to rest. I stood there for a while with the drawer open, letting the quiet settle into the room like a new kind of peace. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't reliving the party or the years before it. I was still. And that stillness? That was mine. No one had to applaud it. No one had to even notice it. It belonged to me. Later that night, I went for a walk around the block. The air had turned brisk, not quite cold, but just enough to wake the skin. Lights glowed in the windows of neighbors' homes. Families gathered at tables, someone watching TV, a child drawing at the kitchen counter. And for a moment, I imagined what it might feel like to live inside one of those windows. The warmth, the routine, the simplicity. But I didn't envy it, because I'd built something different. Harder, maybe, but mine. Back home, I made tea, sat at my window, watched the sky change. My phone buzzed once. An old classmate tagging me in a post. I didn't check it. I just let the silence hold me. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because, finally, there was no more need to explain who I was, or who I had always been beneath the noise. Let them say what they will. Let the story reshape. I'm not the family failure. I'm the mirror they didn't know they were standing in front of. And now I don't look away. Have you ever been labeled the disappointment in your family, only to realize later that you were the one holding everything together in silence? If Hannah's story resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. We read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true stories about women finding their power when no one's looking.